Hello everyone, this is Kel's Books for Kids, and here is Ever After High, Storybook of Legends, Part 2. Chapter 4, Maddie's Chat with the Narrator. And so our character's legacy year at Ever After High began. Wait, who are you, voice? Oh, you really can hear me? Of course I can. Well, I'm the narrator. Hi, narrator. I'm Madeline Hatter, and I'm really enjoying all your clever observations and helpful information. Why, thank you. No one's ever noticed before. I'm pretty good at noticing things. I'm also good at standing on my head, eating 3 at once, talking without taking a breath for a long time, picking out a good watermelon, and thinking up riddles, though I can't always solve them, at least not on my own. Other people's riddles are easier to solve, don't you agree? I hadn't thought about it before, but I shall try to observe. That's what I do best. And I'd best get back to it. Okay, I'll be listening. Chapter 5, That Dangerous Word. Raven took her tray to the last table in the cafeteria, her back to one of the trees that grew from the floor to the skylight 6 stories up. A leaf drifted down, plopping onto the surface of Raven's soup. She stuck her spoon into the bowl to flick the leaf out, but her spoon clinked against something unexpectedly hard amid the stewed carrots and potatoes. Heads up, it's stone soup again, said Raven, as Maddie and Cedar Wood set their trays down beside hers. Cedar groaned and picked up her spoon with her bright blue fingers. While the rest of her was the fiery brown of the cedar wood she'd been carved from, her fingers were covered in blue paint up to her knuckles. You could tell a lot about Cedar's current art projects by the colour of her fingers. She didn't mind getting messy. She just sanded the paint off. Raven finished the stone out of her soup and dumped it on her napkin. Cedar did the same. Raven heard a crunch. Maddie, said Raven, you're not supposed to eat the stone. Why not? Said Maddie. It's delightfully crunchy. How do you even do that? Raven asked. I mean, it's a rock. Maddie shrugged. Sometimes things aren't impossible the first time I try, because I don't know they're impossible yet. I probably couldn't do it again, though. Chewing rocks is just creepy and weird, Cedar said. She blushed, her wooden cheeks a deep orange brown. Sorry, I can't tell a lie, but I like you a lot. Whew, I'm glad that's true. Maddie smiled, her teeth stuck with stone dust. A pod for peas wears hearts on a sleeve. Riddleish alert, said Cedar and Raven at once. Whoops, said Maddie. I meant to say, I like you too. As a first-year student, Raven had been alarmed by her new friend Maddie's habit of suddenly speaking nonsense, but she quickly got used to her random bursts of Riddleish, one of the native languages of Wonderland. It still sounded like nonsense to Raven, but Maddie swore it made sense. There were shouts of surprise around the cafeteria. Raven looked up to see fairy godmothers in training poofing in, handing out class schedules, and poofing away again, appearing and disappearing in clouds of pink smoke. A fairy godmother in training handed Cedar a paper just before she poofed away. Oh no, said Cedar quietly, reading her schedule. This year I have woodshop. All those saws, she shuddered. Another fairy godmother in training puffed amid a pink smoke in front of Raven. She held out the class schedule with a smile. Then, seeming to recognise Raven Queen, she shrieked and disappeared with Raven's class schedule. Raven groaned. Is it getting worse? She asked Cedar, because her friend would always tell her the truth. She had no choice. She had been cursed with absolute honesty from the moment the blue-haired fairy's wand touched the wooden puppet Pinocchio had carved to be his daughter. Yeah, it is getting worse, Cedar said reluctantly. I think people have always been a little cautious around you. I know I was last year. It was kind of overwhelming, leaving Dad and our warm, cosy carving shop, coming to this massive castle of a boarding school with hundreds of new faces, and then, on top of it all, realizing I was rooming next door to the daughter of the greatest evil there ever was. Cedar smiled and nudged Raven with her elbow. Fortunately, it didn't take me too long to realize how unbelievably awesome you are. But this year, maybe because Legacy Day is coming up, everyone's seeing one another not just for who we are, but who we'll become. That's what I was afraid of. Raven dropped her spoon, no longer hungry. All the poofing had stopped. Everyone was looking over their schedules. Maddie read hers aloud. Chemistry, riddling, storytelling 101. Hey, wait, Raven said. I didn't get my schedule. Cedar looked around, concerned. Each time she changed expressions, her wooden face made a hushed creak. You probably have to get it from your advisor, said Cedar. Who is it again? Raven sighed. Baba Yaga. Cedar shivered. Sorry, Raven. Oh well, said Raven, that's what I get for being a dark sorceress. Before going to see her advisor, Raven stopped in her dorm room to change out of her spiky-heeled sandals. A visit to Baba Yaga's office required running shoes. Raven spent half an hour walking outside the castle before she found the round, thatched-roofed cottage lurking in a stone courtyard. She stopped cold. It hadn't seen her yet. On her tiptoes she crept forward. She held her breath. Her sneakers squeaked. The cottage turned slightly. Its two front windows seemed to look at her. The curtains lowered and rose again, as if blinking. Raven smiled, trying to look harmless. The cottage rose up on chicken legs and ran. No! Raven darted out of the cottage, leaping over hay bales and dodging carts and carriages. Not the pig field, not the pig field, Raven muttered. The cottage darted into the pig field. This was going to get messy. Raven chased mud and muddy-looking stuff that smelled worse than mud coating her black sneakers. She squelched. The cottage veered to the left. Raven leapt, scrambling for a hold on the front steps. There were several jarring bounces, and then the cottage stopped, settling on the ground with a sigh. Raven wiped the sweat off her forehead. She scrambled to her feet on the front step and knocked. From inside came the sound of an indignant sniff. I smell evil, Baba Yaga yelled through the door. Come in, Raven Queen. The door swung in as if the cottage had inhaled it open. Raven stooped under the low threshold and entered. The room was smoky, lit from firelight, candles, and a hole in the centre of the roof. The front windows, apparently, were just for show. The walls dripped with drapes, tasselled carpets swayed from ceiling hooks. Cages dangled everywhere, housing birds and lizards and creatures Raven couldn't name. Baba Yaga sat cross-legged on a stool that appeared to hover slightly above the floor. Her long grey hair was knotted with feathers, snarls, braids, and small bones. Her skirts, shirt, and vest were drab, but her hands, neck, and ears sparkled with enough jewellery to please a sultan. You have come seeking knowledge or wisdom? She asked. Actually, just my class schedule. When Raven told her advisor what had happened in the castleteria, Baba Yaga cackled. Where her mother's cackle was a thing of frightening beauty, her advisor's cackle invoked only fright. Some fairy godmother in training was good and terrified, was she? Realized she was facing the future evil queen herself? Ha! Good work, Raven. If you scare them, you're doing it right. Raven mumbled something. Eh? What was that? Speak up. Don't mumble like a caterpillar. I said I don't want to scare them. Baba Yaga picked up the blue spray bottle and squirted Raven in the face with water, making Raven blink. "This is how I train my cats not to jump up on my table. They learn after a while. Maybe you will too." Baba Yaga considered Raven, then sprayed her a couple more times for good measure. "Oh, you got it up my nose," said Raven. "You are a dark sorceress. Don't be a wet cat." Baba Yaga snapped her fingers, lifted her hand, and pulled a sheet of paper as if it came from the air above. She handed it to Raven. Her class schedule. Raven read it over with increasing horror. General villainy, home evilnomics, poison fruit theory, history of evil spells, kingdom mismanagement. "This is a major fairy fail," said Raven. "It all looks appropriate to me," said the dark sorceress advisor. "I was hoping for at least a music class. Don't I have any choice?" Raven stopped. The cottage got quiet, as if it had stopped breathing. The very air seemed to vibrate with that word. Choice. Baba Yaga studied Raven thoughtfully with those cold grey eyes. Then she sprayed her advisee in the face. "Ugh, stop." "I'm sorry," said Raven. "You should be. Choice is a dangerous word. You cannot throw it around idly, not in Ever After. Why the sudden interest in choice?" Raven was tempted to confide in Baba Yaga all her fears about Legacy Day, but she looked into that face, all the wrinkles pointing down with her frown, and was certain the old sorceress wouldn't understand, so Raven just shook her head. "Headmaster Grim won't tolerate the foolishness during your Legacy year. Take the classes you're assigned and be grateful. I don't change you into a worm. I feed to my newt." Baba Yaga sniffed. Grime lined her wrinkles. "You may choose one class, and in the future be more cautious when talking about choice." Raven smiled. "Music class, please." Baba Yaga wrote with her pointy grey fingers on Raven's schedule, and with a gust of wind opened the door and sent Raven and her schedule flying out. Raven pursued her wind-chase schedule, grabbing it out of the air just before it flew over a wall. Through a window she could see Apple meeting with the advisor of the princesses, Wonderland's White Queen. They were sitting in a real room on real chairs, drinking hot cocoa and apparently having a perfectly pleasant time. There was no sign of a spray bottle. Raven picked up a stick and scraped at the mud and other stuff on her shoes. She could try to clean it with magic, but the magic might backfire and take her shoes off with the dirt, and perhaps her toenails for good measure. She was on her way to her dorm to change when she passed Milton Grimm. Ever After High's headmaster was tall, his dark grey hair and moustache beginning to streak with white. He wore a suit, a vest, a tie, and a heavy keyring at his belt that jangled when he walked. "Raven Queen, visiting your advisor, I presume?" He indicated the mud drying on Raven's shoes and smiled. "Yeah, her cottage ran into a pig field." "So you chased it down? That's the spirit?" Raven shrugged. "Miss Queen, would you step into my office for a moment?" She followed him in. The office was as large as the throne room, and his chair was the throne itself, sitting on a dais behind a heavy oaken desk. Between the bookshelves, lining the high walls, hung the heads of long-dead mystical creatures. In place of honour in the room's centre, and locked inside a crystal box on a gilded pedestal, waited the storybook of legends. Raven shivered as she passed it. She sat on the smaller throne before his desk. He glanced up as if making sure the door was shut before he spoke. "Did you have your yearly mirror chat with you-know-who?" Raven nodded. "And you told no one? It wouldn't be good for morale. Everyone but you, me, your father, Giuseppe, and Baba Yaga believes the evil queen is no more." I've kept the secret for years. You can trust me." He tilted his head as if he wasn't sure. "And you didn't touch the mirror?" "Of course not. It was a lot of work catching her and locking her away. I don't fancy another go of it. Your mother is a fine example of what can go wrong when a character doesn't follow her prescribed script." Raven didn't answer. She'd heard this speech before. "Ah, your class schedule. May I?" He held out his hand and she gave him the paper. It all looks excellent, except for this music class that's really only for happily ever after princesses to help them develop their signature power ballads. But I love music, and Baba Yaga said I could choose." Headmaster Grimm raised an eyebrow at the word, and Raven wished she could take it back. She could almost feel Baba Yaga's cold water squirting up her nose. "Miss Queen, last year was your freedom year, when you had the opportunity to choose your own classes. Now it's time to grow up. In your legacy year, all students must focus on who they will become. You are destined to be the evil queen." "Yeah, about that. My mum wasn't just Snow White's evil queen, like my grandma was, and great-grandma, and great-great-grandma, and great-great-great... No, as I said, she overreacted. Yeah. After her part with Snow White, she was off script in a major way. So what's my destiny? To do just the regular evil queen shtick? Or am I going to become like my mother and elbow my way into Sleeping Beauty and invade Wonderland and try to rule all happily ever afters? Do I have to become the greatest evil the world has ever known?" He straightened. "Are you doubting me? Do you dare question me? I am Milton Grimm." Raven shrank in her chair. The headmaster took a deep breath and put his straight smile back on. "Your story, and your very life, is far too important to risk on wild speculation." He erased music class from her schedule with a flick of his fingertip and handed the paper back. "You must try to play your part. We all must, or our very existence is in danger." "Yeah." Raven started folding her class schedule into the shape of a heart. "Raven." Headmaster Grimm smiled, but the smile didn't seem to reach his eyes. "You have so much potential. Don't waste it. Embrace your destiny." Raven nodded. She left his office and continued down the hall, past the first year's lockers, hopping over the occasional toadstool. They grew at the base of the tree pillars, but sometimes spread out further, sprouting up between the floor tiles. Raven didn't like how they squished underfoot. She heard music and followed it to the music classroom. Sparrow Hood was using the empty room for his band's practice session. They weren't great, but hey, it was music. Sparrow, in a great felt cap just like the one his dad, Robin, had made famous, was rocking out as he led. The merry men backed him up on guitars, bass, drums, and one enthusiastic cowbell. The music faltered when they noticed Raven standing in the threshold. Sparrow smacked his chest with his hand. "I've been shot through the heart, men. Never have I ever seen such smouldering beauty." In a moment he was kneeling before her, holding both her hands. He smiled up at her with a roguish grin. Despite herself, Raven had to admit that he was cute. He leaned in with puckered lips to kiss her knuckles. "Whatever after," Raven said, pulling her hands away. "I know you're just trying to steal my rings, Sparrow." "Only for the poor, like me." He cocked his hat to the one side and winked before back-flipping away from her to his microphone stand. He struck a pose with one fist on his hips, one foot propped upon the bass drum. Raven sighed. Hanging out with Sparrow was not her ideal pastime, but his band was the best band at Ever After High. Well, okay, it was the only band at Ever After High. "Hey, merry men," said Raven. The merry men waved. The one holding the cowbell waved, with the instrument in hand, ringing away. "Let me guess. You've come to apply to be a groupie," Sparrow said. "You're in luck. We're now accepting this year's applications." "Actually, I was wondering if, you know, if you auditioned female vocalist for your group to do backup or whatever. She dared to look up. Sparrow wore a frozen expression of surprise. What? You mean you? He said. Can you even sing? Hex, yeah. Give me a shot and I'll... Sparrow laughed. No thanks. You haven't even heard me, she said. I don't have to. You're not singing on my stage. Evil cramps our style. I'm not evil. Sparrow backed away with his arms crossed in front of him, faking fear. There she goes, men. Look out, or she'll turn you into the toads. The merry men laughed. You're already toads, so it'd be a waste of magic, she said. Hey, said Hopper Croakington, son of the Frog Prince, who happened to be passing by. Raven rushed past him and ran. All she wanted to do was go and hide in her room and tell Maddie everything. She burst open her dorm room. Welcome home, roomie, said Apple. Maddie's side of the room had been transformed redwood furniture, canopy, gilded chairs, and wardrobe. Raven backed out and checked the names on the door. Raven Queen and Madeline Hatter. She was in the right room. We're roommates now, Apple said cheerily, folding her satin monogrammed underwear and putting them into a dresser. I asked Headmaster Grimp if we could share a room, since we share a story. Oh. A year in one room with Apple. Was there no escape from the looming spectre of her legacy? And look, I decorated your side of your room. Raven's ebony furniture all had evil-looking spikes now. Her mirror, her headboard, her chair had been transformed into a spiky throne. Now you'll feel right at home, Apple smiled, waiting to be thanked. But Raven turned and ran away.
Okay everyone, that's the end of part 2. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Part 3 will be coming out soon and I promise it won't be too long. Give this video a thumbs up and thank you for listening. Bye!